welcome back to another video. This one's going to be a little bit different. In this one, I'm going to be giving my thoughts on patch 7.3.5, as well as maybe talk a little bit about my thoughts of Battle for Azeroth, because by now I feel like everyone's kind of gotten their thoughts out, and I have had time to really think about stuff and see what I feel about it. So, I was a bit confused today because, let me turn my volume down real quick. I was a bit confused today because WoW was down abnormally longer than it usually was. And it was down in like the evening until just recently. And this was a bit confusing to me. I didn't actually know that the patch was coming out today, but it is. Well, it was. And we have patch 7.3.5. So the biggest feature that got introduced, I would say the biggest feature. I know a lot of people would probably say that Ulduar time walking is the most important added feature. But I'm just going to go down some of the major points. I'm not going to be talking about class changes in this video. I might save that for another video. I'm not sure if there were any. I don't think so. But basically, there have been two really big things released and a lot of little things. So I'll mostly be focusing on the two big things. So firstly, Ulduar time walking got released. So there's now going to be a what is it called? Time walking. Yeah, it's going to be a time walking thing for Ulduar. And I find this to be really, really awesome because people always complain about how WoW isn't like it used to be. That is a topic that has been said so many times that it's almost not even worth mentioning. But it is worth mentioning just because there's so many people that say it. So it's kind of like a vicious cycle of truth and untruth. So WoW's a different game, but it doesn't change the fact that everyone's going to have their favorite expansion. For a lot of people, I'm sure Legion will be their favorite expansion. There's people who think Cataclysm was the best expansion. There's just different like opinions, and there can be a majority, such as most people that I've talked to think that Wrath of the Lich King was the best expansion, and that's probably personally mine as well, although I really like Mists of Pandaria too. It still kind of harkens back to those old days whenever you tie things in from those old expansions that people came to love. And it really makes the experience a lot more kind of consistent and a lot more open. And Asmongold once said something that I thought was very true. You're not playing expansions, you're playing patches. And I don't think that's how it should be, because if you take, even though I really love Mists of Pandaria to death, I can realize and acknowledge its flaws. Let's take Mists of Pandaria as an example. You had patches where we would go to places like the Throne of Thunder, or we'd go to places like the Heart of Fear. And yes, in that specific expansion, that means something. It's important to stop the Shaws, and it's just important to do all this stuff. Well, with that said, it's like, after Mists of Pandaria, what did defeating those people do other than just ensure they weren't going to mess with us again? None of the bosses felt world-ending like a Lich King or like Deathwing or Sargeras, or Kil'jaeden, and it comes down to people. When you invest like a year and a half, 2 years, depending on how long an expansion is, trying to get to a goal, and every boss and raid and stuff feels very splintered, it's not as rewarding when you kill the final boss of that expansion, because you don't necessarily feel like a lot is built up. When you take an expansion like Wrath of the Lich King, which had some of the best raids and dungeons in the game, a lot of people's favorites are like Ulduar, ICC, raids like that. It is an interesting thing how the entire expansion of Wrath of the Lich King was built around dungeons and zones that had to do with defeating the Lich King, getting to know more about the Lich King, fighting back against the Lich King, and all the things that tied into that. And I feel like the past few expansions haven't done justice to that core concept that a lot of people recall as being the best. And I can fully understand where they're coming from. Do I feel the same? I think that it's good to have different types of expansions, and obviously Deathwing isn't the same as Arthas or Lich King, and it's you can have these world-ending type of threats every expansion without having to resort to the same sort of storyline, because obviously good writing, there'll be different characters, and I think that they should put more consideration into making the community feel as if, like making the player base feel as if what they're doing has some sort of overall effect on the game. Because yeah, there's a lot of people who are just gonna sign on and do battlegrounds and not give a shit, but a lot of people really care about the world of Warcraft, like what's inside the world and the characters within the world. And I think that you have to engage people in a game to get them hooked. And this is one thing a lot of people don't think about, is you have to engage people and get them with a hook when a game first comes out. And World of Warcraft managed to do that in a huge way. But you have to throw a hook farther and farther and pull back harder and harder every single expansion the longer it goes on. Because WoW's graphics may not be the best, some of the gameplay elements may not be the best, but people come back for the overall feeling of playing WoW because it's not like any other game. I mean, there's plenty of MMOs, there's plenty of RPGs in general, and every expansion, they're trying to roll the dice and use a concept from either their lore or something they make up for that expansion to make people want to not play all of the other MMOs and RPGs that might have better gameplay or better graphics instead of theirs. And WoW has managed to do that, but they have dropped subscriptions. Well, two things about that. One, they're counting, I think they're only counting Americans for the percentage, and it's like still 7 million at the beginning of Legion. And they're not counting that a lot of people buy WoW tokens now. They're not counting merchandise. I mean, there's a lot of factors. WoW's not in trouble, but they have lost quite a few people, because before WoW tokens got introduced, WoD's player base, I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that they had dropped literally 50% of their fan base. 50%. And when you still have 7 million, that's obviously a ton. That's humongous. There's no games like that. Like, no games get that type of player base. But it also is like, why did half of the people who enjoyed playing our game suddenly stop playing because of this expansion? That's the moment when you really have to take into consideration everything that led up to that point and what people aren't enjoying about the current expansion you're on. And the best thing and only thing you can do is try to rectify that in the future to fix and put out whatever fire you've created. And once you start an expansion, it's very difficult for them to reverse something that they've done, because I'm sure they have plans for the entire expansion as soon as they start working on it. But WoW is a game where it's constantly engaged people, and they're not in any trouble. I fully swear to you guys, they will get multiple more expansions. I wouldn't be surprised if they get just as many as they have right now in the future. Which I think would be like 6 or 7. I don't want to count. Sorry, I'm lazy. But they're fine. They have subscriptions. They have WoW tokens. They have merchandise. And they have BlizzCon and stuff like that. But at the same time, you really have to take into consideration why those numbers dropped. Because from a business standpoint, what you got to think about is, okay, we had 14 million or 16 million or 17 or 18 million or however many on any given expansion. Near the end of an expansion, you're always going to have subscriptions drop, but just take your pick from whatever expansion you want, whether it be like 7 million, 14 million, 18 million, whatever. We have this player base, and people have quit. A lot of people have quit. We're fine. We are not in any financial danger. We have other games, and WoW's our biggest. What if we were to make that same mistake a second time? You see where I'm coming from, guys? What if we accidentally make that same mistake a second time and another half leaves? And then what if the next expansion after that, 75% leave? You see what I mean? And if the decline happens in clumps, that goes to show that there's a certain type of gameplay element that the player base unanimously disagrees on as a community and as a solo single player within an MMORPG that could agree with someone else that's standing beside them. And they can't afford to continuously make mistakes because in the short term they're fine, but in the long term they really have to take a step back, both metaphorically and maybe physically, and just say, what are we doing wrong that's driving away these people that had previously really enjoyed our game? Now, obviously, you can't just make Wrath of Lich King over and over and over. You can't make the same expansion. That's where it's tricky. I'm not a game developer. I can't speak for game developers. I can't say, this is why they do this is why they do that. All I can do is take a step back as a player and say, this is what I personally disagree with, and this is what I like. And I think that they have taken many missteps, and the issue is they keep digging their hole deeper and deeper, and I'm afraid of it getting to the point to where it would take patches and patches or expansions to reverse the damage. You can just bring back PvP vendors if you want, but there's so many other things that they have put into the game that people are used to, even if they don't like. And people are going to think that Blizzard is extremely inconsistent if they do something and then they reverse it, and then they do something else and then they reverse that. There's always going to be evolution and change. It's just not necessarily the good type of evolution. The pendulum will always swing back and forth. If there's something in the game that you like, chances are it's probably going to come back. The pendulum will always swing when it comes to what you like, what you don't like, because they, like I said, they have to change things up. And then they always incorporate new elements that are, new, that haven't been in previous expansions that are unique, such as the island feature in Battle for Azeroth, which I'm looking forward to. But I think that with WoW, they need to not necessarily be careful, but stick with what works while keeping their imagination open. And that is difficult to do. I understand that sentence may seem a little contradicting, but if they stay to what's true, to the values of the game, and to what they know people enjoy, but still manage to incorporate some new elements that blend in with what works, it would be less noticeable if those features don't end up turning out right. And if you eventually saw that the community really, really enjoyed a certain feature that you blended in with one of the features that worked, then you could end up removing the original feature or having a diminishing effect on it, and using that to your advantage as a test to see community feedback, not just PTR, but actual in-game player base, and have them see if it works, see how they like it. And if it's something that they legitimately enjoy, then you know that that works and that you can implement that in a full-time way. You don't have to just spring certain features on us. They just went from having PvP vendors, one expansion, to just completely Xing them out. They could have Blizzard could have done something where they maybe had a PvP vendor that sold PvP gear a different way, or that didn't have the PvP stats on them, or that maybe took a certain type of currency that was different, or see how the community reacts to PvP vendors being different. And if they see that people are on board with the idea and thought it was unique, then they could eventually remove them. Or if they don't like it, if the community reacts in a negative fashion, then don't include that in the final cut of the expansion or patch or whatever you're working on. And I think that Blizzard takes leaps forward without, I don't want to say without thinking, but without thinking. And they don't give it much time to register with the fan base. They just bring it on it and expect that the players will work it out. But I think they should do it slowly. So the next big thing, I'm going to my map for this. Holy shit, guys. Okay, you ready? Eastern Kingdoms. Well, not every single zone besides the starter zones scale up. Good job. Like, holy crap, guys. I can't even begin to put into words just how amazing this is. And it's neat because it shows you where, like, the starter quests begin. Oh my, holy crap, guys. It's so amazing. So, scaling has been applied to the older zones, and holy fuck, that's so amazing. I just can't explain how good of a feature that is. This should have been implemented back when scaling was implemented to begin with, but I know that it was probably a lot of work to fix the algorithms and the quest to adapt to whatever level you were. It works for all of the Eastern Kingdom zones, all of the Kalimdor zones, Kalimdor zones. All the Cataclysm zones have now been scaled up to be able to be quested in from 80 to 90. Pandaria has also been scaled. So I'll talk about Battle for Azeroth later, because my friend just messaged me. But for now, guys, if you like the video, give it a like, subscribe, comment, and until then, farewell.